Representative Tulsi Gabbard is seeking your support in the race for the Democratic nomination for president, and obviously that kind of race is impacted by national issues. Last week, early on, Representative Gabbard expressed some concerns about the impeachment inquiry, but over the weekend she said she is favorable to it. Let's talk to Representative Tulsi Gabbard on the WHO Radio Newsmakers Line. Representative Gabbard, welcome back to WHO. Good morning to you.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm great. How are you?
I am doing very well. So tell me about your thoughts today on the impeachment inquiry. Why do you find it necessary?
Well, look, I think you know my position has long been that an impeachment process that's driven by political motives will further tear apart an already divided country. Mm-hmm. I am running for president to defeat Donald Trump. I disagree with many of his policies. I believe that the voters in this country need to be the ones to make that decision. After looking at the information that came out over the last several days, a combination of both the transcript that was first released, followed by the whistleblower complaint, the inspector general memo, the other comments that President Trump made following the release of those documents, created some very deep concern with me about the questions and the issues that were raised in those documents, conversations, and in those remarks. And I think it warrants a review and an inquiry by Congress.
And so I've made this clear to the audience, an inquiry is much different than actually voting for it. So, Representative Gabbard, are you saying, look,
exactly.
I think we want to investigate, look at it, but you're not saying this is impeachable at this moment?
I'm not, and I think it's important to make that clear, and I'm glad you're doing so, because for anyone, from any political party to anyone else, if you're calling for impeachment without doing your due diligence, I think there are very serious concerns and questions that have been raised, both by members of Congress from both political parties, and I think from people across the country, and the truth needs to be heard before any kind of decision or determination should be made. I think it's important as we look at what's in the best interest of our country to go through this process as it's laid out, to investigate the situation, to conduct this inquiry in a way that is swift, thorough, and narrowly focused. This is what the American people deserve.
Let's talk about some other top issues as you campaign across Iowa, Representative Gabbard. Of course, we're all very interested in the talk about the electoral college, because
yes.
Small states like us, we're worried about the talk of completely eliminating it. What are your thoughts on that?
I share your concern. I come from an even smaller state.
That's true. Hawaii. Yeah.
Hawaii, we're out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and are already even too often dismissed. But it is the smaller states, the less populated states, the rural states in our country who would really lose if the Electoral College was thrown out. I think it is not. It's not good as it stands. I think there are reforms that need to be made to make sure that it accurately reflects the votes and the voices of the people in every state in this country. And I think it's important to point out that those who are calling for to get rid of the Electoral College, they're talking about a constitutional amendment. And you know how difficult that is to pass, which means this broken system that is not reflective of the votes that people are casting would be allowed to stand until that happens. I take a much more practical and I think a better approach, which would be to bring about reform that would not require a constitutional amendment, to make sure that the electoral votes from every state are proportional in reflecting the actual percentage of votes cast. As you know, right now, if I were to win the state of Iowa by 55%, for example, in a general election, I would get all of the electoral votes from Iowa. I believe that the Electoral College should represent the votes that are cast, which means I would get 55% of those electoral votes, while the other candidate would get the remaining. I think that would provide the kind of transparency and representation in our votes through the Electoral College.
I want to also move on to the healthcare issue, Representative Gabbard, because the national media is dominated by impeachment talk right now, and I get that. I'm not saying that isn't at the top of people's minds, but there are other issues that you're hearing about when you're talking to Iowans. Healthcare comes up time and time again, and a big issue is cost of health care, another issue, access to health care. What's your plan, Representative Gabbard?
Yeah, thanks. You mentioned impeachment is driving the national headlines, but I've been doing multiple town halls here across different communities in Iowa since Friday, I believe.
Yeah.
And not a single person has asked a question or raised a comment or concern about impeachment or the inquiry, which I found to be very interesting, which just shows the disconnect between what's happening in Washington and what folks are really, really concerned about and thinking about. And healthcare is at the top of that list. I believe that in this country, the wealthiest nation in the world, where we are paying far more for healthcare with worse outcomes, we need serious reform. We've got to change the system as it stands. I believe that we need to have a Medicare for all type system as the core and foundation that ensures every single American is able to get the quality health care they need when they need it, while also allowing for a private option to exist. So if you've got great employer provided health care plan through a private insurance, or you're a member of if you're a teacher, a firefighter, and your union has negotiated a great health care plan for you, if you want to stick with that, you should be able to. But for those who do not have those options or who don't make enough money to be able to afford a good insurance plan, we've got to have a Medicare for all program there for everybody.
Representative Gabbard, one final question for you before you head off on the campaign trail. WHO listeners certainly appreciate hearing from you, and they may disagree with some of your positions, agree with some of your positions, but they like hearing from you. And you are working very hard in Iowa. Do you think the process is fair to a candidate like you? And I say that because Iowans, you just said something really, really important. Not a single person's talking to me about impeachment, Jeff. They're talking to me about health care, the issues that matter to your life. Do you think the overall process is fair to a candidate like you?
Here's the problem with the current system as we see it is you have a few folks in Washington within the DNC who would like to see themselves as the gatekeepers, telling voters in Iowa and states across the country who you should be allowed to choose from as we go through the process to select our nominee. This is what we've seen through the lack of transparency, through the debate process, and so on. And I think this disrespects voters because you know better than most that, look, Iowa voters take your responsibility very seriously and understand that you are the ones who make that decision, not some folks sitting in an office in Washington, D.C. And so that's where, look, debates or no debates for me, my focus is on continuing to reach directly to voters all across Iowa, and not just Democrat voters, but Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians, raising the issues that I feel strongly about, speaking to the kind of unifying leadership that I'll bring to our country, inspired by our freedoms and principles enshrined in our Constitution, saying, hey, we've got to work together to be able to solve the challenges we face. We are stronger when we do so, and this is how we lead to a better and brighter future.
Representative Tulsi Gabbard, she would like your support in the Democratic race to be the nominee for President of the United States.